Hey, so Jude, you're on mute. And I know we have Connor. Hi, Connor. Oh, we're still connecting to audio. Oh, yeah, Connor saw the eclipse. He was somewhere north of here. So did you see the eclipse, Jude?
It was a little overcast where I was.
Yeah, it was a little overcast too, but the clouds moved enough.
Yeah.
We got to see what there was to see. We didn't get a total here, but we saw what there was to see. Had our glasses, so yep, all good.
I have them from last time.
Ah, yep. So I guess they're probably still good.
I would think so.
So
Hello, I'm in. Can everyone hear me?
hi there, and there's Linda. Yes, Connor, I can hear, and hi, Linda. I see Linda. So okay, so I know we want to get going. I know ZRC wise, we do have a quorum. We have Jude, Connor, and me, and Connor wasn't sure how long he could stay on because he's got some personal things going on. So I don't know if Connor, if you have a best estimate or not, I guess.
I'm gonna say 7:30, maybe 8.
Oh, okay. Well, we should.
I would rather we go shorter today too, just to.
We'll go whenever people want to go. So my thought, well, two things. As I mentioned to Connor when we talked, and I don't think I mentioned to you, Jude, but so I did add some words to the scenic overlay law that I'm looking to have get back in the town board. A quorum of the town board did agree that people should be able to maintain their view, not make it bigger, but maintain. And in conversations I had with Butch and with Melissa and with Judy Kerman, it was believed that doing that through an SUP to have good governance guidance and that photos could be taken, et cetera, so that there could be some record of what they had to make sure that they're staying with what they had. So those are the words. So the wording that I have has it being an SUP going back to the planning board and requiring an SUP. And so I did add those words. So I don't know if we want to look at that or just say, because I know I sent it, you maybe looked at my updates already. I don't know if you have any recommended changes to the wording or not.
I did look at it.
Okay, any recommended changes to
No,
the work?
I'm glad you made it an SUP. I think that's good. I personally didn't think it should be allowed at all, but
Well, neither did Connor, and my apologies for that. But
Or
once
Ed.
so yeah, so in any event, but okay. So that being said, I just pass it along to the town board and say, you're not looking for changes to the wording. I know you wish, yeah, you would have rather had it be the other way, but anyway, I'll go ahead and send it. Send TB. Okay. Alrighty. And that will happen sometimes as we do things. The board has typically not overridden very much that we've done, but in this case, I got phone calls, Bill McKenna got phone calls, and we just thought it was the right thing to put some ability with some control over it. So in any event, that's where we are. All right, that being said, I thought that we would just start out with the law we've been working on. I'll just share my screen and we'll go through because I went through and made comments and I went through and we did definitions updates before. And so I propagated those throughout the document so that the terminology was consistent. So I thought we would just go through that document and start there. But I also got, Jude, your emails, and I printed out your 3 emails that you sent I figure we'll go through the document and then we should loop back around and look at some things before we're done. The emails you sent would be good to loop back around. The current STR law in Woodstock is good to loop back around. And what the STR task force gave us is good to loop back around. And then any of the laws you want to look at from different towns. But all that being said, let me just bring up.
Connor, were you able to see any of my emails that I sent today?
Yes, they all came through.
Okay, and let me just make sure I've got the latest copy up here because I don't want to. before. Yes, I've got the latest copy up here. Okay, and I'm gonna do a save as. I'll share my screen in just a moment. Okay, and we'll go back. Okay, so I've shared my screen. So let's move that over. There we go. Oh, better. There we go. All righty. So I can see you all, plus I can see my screen. So what I have at the top is just stuff I wanted to remember that we received. And here's where we were. And I'm looking for my comments. Okay, so I had put in here my questions, and I think Jude, you and Connor had worked this together and seen it all, but then I looked through it and put my comments in just to ask some questions.
Actually, it was me and Ed.
Okay. So my questions were: short-term rental shall be incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes. And I wasn't quite sure. A short-term rental shall be incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes. So we're saying, when we talked about the 4 types of STRs, where there were 2 when the owner is on premise when people are there, and 2 kinds when the owner is not on premise when the renters are there. If somebody rents less than 30 days, then I agree the short-term rental is incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit, because then who's ever there most of, 10 months out of the year, it's a primary unit. So this is really saying, the way I read this, that we also had the 4th category was the owner is not there and they're going to rent it for more than 30 days in the year. So what we're saying here, shall be incidental and secondary to use of dwelling unit. If it's rented a bunch of days out of the year, then it wouldn't be incidental, perhaps.
So I guess my thinking here, I think I lifted this from another law. A lot of this was from researching and reading other laws. And, I've been pushing and saying that it should be limited how many days they can be rented. I think that that's really important. So then it does make it secondary and incidental so that it doesn't become a hotel. And
Okay.
so that's, again, I am pretty certain I got that, I could go back and look, but that was from another law. And I think it's important that we establish that.
Okay.
The email that I sent out today, said there are basically several ways to control this. And
Right.
I don't know which way the town is going to be willing to go, but it's certainly, I just saw there was an article in the New York Times, and this was in the Poconos, and it was, an HOA, which is a slightly different situation, but they're limiting,
Right.
they're limiting STRs to 10, they can rent them 10 times a year. That's it.
Well,
and that's one way of controlling them is, so that they don't become a hotel.
right. So our current law allows a maximum of 180 days per calendar year. Non-owner occupied STRs may be rented out a maximum of 180 days per calendar year, no more than 26 weekends or parts of weekends, where a weekend is any time between Friday evening and Monday morning.
And I think that's excessive.
Okay.
That's the other thing, I looked at, we looked at Rhinebeck, we looked at
Mm.
Vermont, we looked at, they're like 10 days, 15 days. We're saying 180. I think it's over the top.
Right. Okay. So, oops, let me keep all this stuff together here. So, and Connor, do you have a thought on that?
I mean, I do feel like we are starting this, not starting, but we're having this discussion on a bit of a back foot, given how permissive the law was already. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Okay, so you agree with Jude that even though we're not going to let everybody have a lot of days, you agree with Jude that we should reduce. Nobody should be able to do as many as 180 days per calendar year.
I mean, it does seem like a lot. I mean, I'm trying to think, I'm trying to be very open-minded about everything in this whole process. But again, what it keeps falling back to me is again, if we think about this definition, I like the definition of short-term rentals being incidental to the property. I mean, that's a part of the character of the community aspect of our considerations that I think is really important and fundamental. So it's like,
Mhm.
are we talking about 180 days a year across the board? I think that could, as in terms of each STR classification, I think we were still at about four, right? Four
Mhm.
different types.
Well, yeah. So,
Uh,
we had two resident occupied and two non-resident occupied. And the two resident occupied, the one was you have a shared entrance, you're sharing the kitchen facilities, you're really only renting out a room, and somebody's going
yeah.
someplace else for their food. So that was the one type. The other type is the residence occupied, but you may have 1 to 3 bedrooms. Somebody that the residents there, but the renters are going to have their own kitchen, so the renters are really self-sufficient, but the owner is there. And then the two that we
So and
had,
that and can you go back up because yeah, that one in particular, I'm just trying to see some things are crossed out that I don't remember. So we're not referring to it as an ADU though. I mean, because that's essentially what that is, right?
well, two things. One is our town law still refers to them as accessory apartments. It was the proposed Housing Oversight Task Force law called them ADUs, but that's not adopted by Woodstock. ADU is the common term used if you look in different counties. That's what's being used currently, but we don't have ADU anywhere in our current law. It's in the Housing Oversight Task Force proposed law that has not been adopted by Woodstock.
I,
So,
I actually, I think I added it to the definitions, ADU.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, but we had said, resident occupied separate, so we had, resident occupied shared and resident occupied separate, meaning the resident's there, but you're sharing the facilities versus the resident is occupied, but there's a separate facility, where they've got their own entrance, they're just doing their own thing, they got their own kitchen, they're just totally living there. So those are the first two types, resident occupied, shared.
Yeah, I didn't understand why you changed the one that was, if you want to call it ADU or accessory apartments, because there's attached accessory apartments and there's detached accessory apartments. And I don't understand why that doesn't say, why that's not good enough for this. I can't imagine what other situation we're talking about. It's either it's an apartment on the property that's attached to the house or it's not. And I
Well,
don't understand why we went this other way.
resident occupied, because we were saying we were talking about in some cases there's a resident occupied, and in some cases the resident is not there. So if the resident is occupied, the distinction I heard last time we talked about this, the distinction I heard was one is everything shared kitchen, everything shared. The
Right,
person's really only getting a room. And then
right.
the other cases, because they could be inside the building, it might not really be an ADU, but they got their own kitchen. They could be outside the building. So it was the idea of the residents there, but there could be an ADU, because if you just say ADU, somebody they may have a rental in the main building and then they have an STR in the ADU. But we were making the distinction, the resident needs to be there, meaning resident occupied. So that's why, and we just lost Connor. So that's why we made the change, because what I was told is that there's some cases where the resident is there and some cases where the resident is not there. So we had two cases resident occupied, because you might be renting out an ADU as a short-term rental and have the resident not there. And that's bad, because if the resident's not there, then nobody's there to kind of oversee what's going on.
No,
So
I understand, but that was the idea of type two, was that it was I'll call it an accessory apartment, whatever you want to call it, with a resident on the premises. So, so that's, I don't really understand why we changed it the way that we did. I mean, but um, because if you have if there is a unit, either attached or detached, that has its own kitchen and its own bathroom and its own bedroom, then that's an accessory apartment. I don't really understand why it's not.
But because we kind of said or, we kind of said, well, if you don't have a shared entrance, because you may have something that's not a shared entrance that doesn't have a kitchen. So it wouldn't be an ADU. So what people were telling me last time, what I heard was the shared entrance was the thing. If it's a shared entrance, if you're going to be this shared, you got to have a shared entrance and a shared kitchen and a shared this and a shared that. And if any of these things aren't shared, then it's considered separate, but it might not be an ADU because it may have a separate entrance, but if it doesn't have its own kitchen, it's not an ADU. So what I was told was the shared was the key thing, that the shared entrance was the key thing. If the key thing is, because you might have, again, this is shared entrance, shared kitchen, you might have something that has not a shared entrance, because if you're telling me that you don't care if the entrance is shared at all or not, you just really care whether the kitchen is there, then I'm okay with swapping it back. But what I heard is if it's not a shared entrance, then it's not a type 1. And you could have a not shared entrance, doesn't have a kitchen either, and then it's not an ADU either. So I'm just trying to make sure it's clear everything fits in one category.
Just give an example of what that would be.
Yeah, you got a separate door. It's like if you're in a motel, you got a separate door that you go in. It's not a shared entrance with the owner. You got a separate door, but you don't have a kitchen. So it's not really an ADU because you have no kitchen. So I might have a room on the back that somebody can go into and it has no kitchen.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm okay. I'm just trying to go with the flow. What I heard was if it's not a shared entrance, it can't be type 1. So therefore, it's type 2.
I feel like if we have some agreement that the term accessory dwelling unit and accessory apartment unit, or whatever we're using now, have some sort of like common understanding of what they mean, then maybe it's just worth including them as examples in this section, because I understand what you're saying, but when last time we discussed this, I read the definition of ADU off of the I think it's the American Planning Association's page. There's nothing in there about kitchens. It's just about standalone structures, attached, above garage, interior, converted garage, detached, etc. And so for me, while I feel like maybe it's splitting hairs a little bit, I don't want to get stuck on this. I just feel like, like right now we're up in just outside, we're outside of Oswego in a nice little cabin setting, but it's one room. Bed is in the dining room, is in the kitchenette. There's a little mini fridge and a microwave and a sink and a bathroom. So it's got a bathroom, it's got a sink, it's got a bed. It's a tiny, tiny little cabin, but it has no stove. And I'm pretty sure if you don't have a stove or like even a hot plate, then it's not really a kitchenette. I don't know about the microwave and stuff, but depending on how granular we want to get.
So I'm sharing my screen. So the definition of ADU, a subordinate dwelling unit having its own kitchen and bathroom facilities, which is the definition I'm familiar with because on the Housing Oversight Task Force, that's what we were talking about. So this is consistent with what I'm familiar with and with Housing Oversight Task Force, who tried to use what was generally used. So if an ADU has its own kitchen and bathroom facilities, then that was what I was keying on. I'm happy to call this.
You know what?
Can I?
One of the things
I'm sorry, go ahead.
one of the things I did notice, and this is one of the things that I had expressed concern to the HOTF when they came to a couple of, the ZBA, I think, or something, is that there are guest cottages and there are accessory apartments, and the only difference is a stove. That's the only difference. It can have a refrigerator, a microwave, a kitchen sink, all of those things. And my understanding was that the HOTF actually changed that. And so that, you know, anything that had a bathroom and a bedroom was considered an ADU. And I think Connor is right. I think we maybe just take out kitchen.
Well, I would have to do research. I'm sorry,
You,
because
you, you're talking about the definition, take it out of the definition of ADU,
Yeah,
or
yeah, because
yeah.
I think that I'm quite sure that was one of the things I looked at. And I went, that's interesting because that will clear up a lot of questions about, because what people do. I mean, let's be real about what happens. People put up their guest cottage, and as soon as they pass all their inspections and get out, they just go buy a stove. It's not, it's not that difficult. Leave a spot, you know, so it should be considered an accessory apartment.
Well, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for just a minute, and I'm gonna go, because I'm gonna go pull up the law. So hang on a
Now,
second.
just again, I'm going to throw this into the chat right now, because I know we want to look at our law, but there's also the American Planning Federation, which I think is as good of a place as anywhere to
Right.
look at this definition. And, you know, again, it's like, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's just, I'm also fine with just throwing in, um, you know, qualifiers that's saying, you know, guest cottages, accessory dwelling units, you know, we can have
Well,
something to umbrella all that, but not mentioning it at all also feels a little bit,
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
well, I was hoping to find, um, the definition of this accessory apartment, just of what we have in our current law, because I like to be consistent with the current law as well.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just looked at it, Connor. I'm telling you, Laura, this has been something that I've been thinking about, and you know, it was one of the things that because you know what, a studio, people put up what they call studios. They got around a lot of regulations by calling it a studio, and essentially it was an accessory apartment. And I
Well,
think it's one of the things that the HOTF actually did address was anything with a bedroom, bathroom, and a, you know, that's considered
okay.
an ADU.
So here's what we're looking at. This is the current law, our current law. The accessory apartment shall be self-contained with separate cooking, sleeping, and sanitary facilities for use by the occupants. So that's why I do not agree with taking kitchens out, because, you know, we're kind of making up the rules as we go along. You know, I have to research, I can research other
Well,
places also, but cooking is, anyway,
well, I
and
mean,
we're
it's
talking,
something we can make a comment on, but I mean, like, except when was that definition decided on? Because even when you go and look up accessory apartment against things like the American Planning Federation, or say, well, I'm sorry, the American Planning Association, or I don't know, this other one, Investopedia. They're all being sort of lumped in with accessory dwelling, and I think the reason for that is because the market for them has changed how these spaces are being used.
okay, well, I would have to do my own research, because again, the Housing Oversight Task Force, I know that we were going with common definitions and, you know, whatever. So in any event, this is where we did leave it before. So I guess the question that I had up higher up, however, was the incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes. So, so when we get into the number of days for the type 4, which I think we're not arguing about the type 4, the type 4 over here, because we had said there are two types when the owner is absent. One is when their owner is absent for a limited time, and one when they're absent for an extended time. And here we would say limited was fewer than a total of 30 days per year, no more than 10 weekends. So that's what the type 3 is, that the owner really lives there most of the year, but is just going to rent it out a small portion. And then type 4 is somebody's really making it a business. And I know, Jude, you've talked about, you don't want a hotel in a residential area, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of what type 4 is. the person's going to rent out like a whole pile of times. So I don't think what we did here is put the limits. So if we're going to say this is incidental, then what the current law says, maximum of 180 days per calendar year, no more than 26 weekends, we want to put smaller numbers than that in, is
Yes.
what I'm believing.
Yes.
So here, so what are you both comfortable with? So the current law says 180. We've said type 3 is no more than 30 days, no more than 10 weekends. So something greater than 30, but less than 180. What do we want to say? The person that is renting as much as they possibly can, what is the max for that?
I just want to throw something out here. Every time I
Sure.
talk to anybody about this, they all say this type 4 should not be allowed, period. Everybody is very sympathetic to people who live here who need, it was sort of the same idea of when accessory apartments were first elected in the law, to try to help them pay their taxes, to try to help them keep their home. Nobody has a problem with that. It's
Right.
that type 4 that everybody really has a problem with. And
Okay.
I don't see, I mean, you know, ideally, I know that that article I sent you in Rhinebeck was, they're like, we're just not going to allow it at all. And I don't see, I would like to see the town say, no, that's it, we're not doing that anymore. But since the town board is probably not going to do that, then I think there should be a limit. And I'm not sure what that number is. I'd like it to be really low.
Well, let me ask you a question though. It occurred to me, and your point was a very good point, that if you're allowing this in a not commercial area, if you're allowing this in a residential area, then you're allowing a hotel in a residential area. So what if we said this is, first of all, restricted to, say, Hamlet commercial? You know, we have some commercial zones within the town, and perhaps restrict first of all, restrict it to commercial zones like Hamlet commercial, light industrial. We have LI1. I think we have LI1, LI2, and neighborhood commercial.
Light industrial can't have any residential use the way the law is now.
Okay, so this would be considered residential then. Okay, so might we say Hamlet commercial and neighborhood commercial? Might we say those are the only districts it's allowed in?
I would just want to sort of extrapolate on Jude's point for a second, just to at least say that we as a board did discuss this in some good faith, to say, like, what is the merit? I mean, again, I think we're all in agreement that this number 4 was always going to be the most restricted.
Totally, yes.
And it's going to be the one that needs the most regulation. So just to say we said something about it, what is the benefit to the town? That was
To
part
allowing
of
this.
to allowing.
Well,
I mean, because again, we in the scope of what we're doing, we're attempting to open up a whole other avenue, for some coexistence. Maybe it's not like it's going to be a giant hit to what was already a booming tourism industry. These, we're talking about right now, few hundred units.
yes, we were going to be more restrictive.
I'm
So
sorry,
yes,
what do you think? It's a few hundred units? The non-owner occupied ones?
I mean, at least it's probably, I would imagine it's probably somewhere between 150 and 200s, right? I mean, how many are there?
well, I think there's not a whole ton, but I'd have to go back and look at what our caps are. But I'm okay. If what you're both saying is that you would like to scrap, so number 4 is no longer allowed, it sounds like you are both saying scrap that.
I'm certainly more of the same mind of Jude. Is like, there are these other 3. I have a very sort of clear community oriented understanding of the benefits of allowing this in us, and for lack of a better word, a holistic sense, like where these categories are limited in scope and also have some consideration for the community built into them. Whereas this one, I'm just like, who is it for? Like, are we overburdening the town to create this very, I don't know, this trickle of opportunity for a very small amount of people in a very infrequent fashion?
Well, so I understand. So we'll, you know, we could take it out and then see what pushback we get. Because, you know, there are going to be some people who, you know, they were allowed to do this, they did it, and it's going to cause them a financial hardship. But I know we've already talked about how the law says, you know, they can still rent it long term. We're not saying that they can't rent it long term. And the law doesn't says, you know, the law does not require us to make sure we always give everybody the greatest financial benefit. So if you're both saying remove this, I'm okay with that. So
I would, Jude, if that's how you feel, I'll definitely support that.
I think that we should. And Laura, I know you're going to get pushback because as I mentioned in my email, those are the people who have been the most vocal about this. But it is such a small proportion, and it's really hard to stand up to it, you know, because just like when we've had these meetings and people are yelling at us about the fees, which of course we know had nothing to do with us. But, you know, I think that there will be pushback. The question is, who are we serving? Are we serving the members of the community? Are we serving people who have investments or people who don't really live here?
yeah.
So I'm all in favor in taking it out.
Okay. So for the purpose of just keeping, I'm going to accept the changes that we made before, and then I'm going to strike the whole number 4. I just want to, if I strike it, then it's going to get confusing about where do we leave it when we struck it. So I'm going to accept, the changes, and then I am going to strike it. So accept that.
And then the question becomes, I believe in fairness would have to give people some notice who already have this.
True. I agree.
And there's probably, I'm sure there's a process that we can find out. I tried to write to Peter Cross and ask him and didn't really get the answer that I was hoping for, except that the town should have never allowed non-owner occupied.
Well, and there were some people that
what?
There were some people that didn't want it. I can tell you that. I know Richard Hepner, my recollection was Richard Hepner didn't really want it. And I think it was, you know, and what was kind of funny was we had people that, you know, it was illegal for people to have STRs, but still people complained, oh, we don't want you to take it away. We've been doing it. Well, it was illegal to do it, but it is what it is. So,
yeah.
But yes, I do know that there were people that definitely didn't want it. So in any event, I've almost got this. Accept this change.
Well, that takes away a lot of other thorny questions, doesn't it?
So yeah. So we're okay. So in any event, well, let me just get the rest of these. Accept insertion. Oh, come on. Accept deletion. Accept insertion. Okay. So that's where we left it. And then we are just going to scrap the whole thing. Okay.
So just to be clear, what we're doing with this is we're saying, if you live here, this is your home. You are on premises. And I know somebody brought up at one of the comments was, how, you know, does that mean somebody can't go to the store? Well, of course, that's ridiculous.
Well, right. And
you know what I mean? Those kinds of comments. But you know, people, we're talking about people who live in the community who need some assistance trying to hold on to their homes, paying their taxes or whatever, the utilities these days, right? That this is, you know, because then they're on the premises, who they rent to is going to affect their lives as well as everybody around them. Yeah. So this is what we are trying to promote, the ability to do that and not this, right?
Okay.
So that was another question for owner absent limited. Right above that was,
yes.
I don't know if we had made a or had a conversation about, do they need a property manager
I'm sorry, do
for
they need,
this limited?
do they need a what was that?
Does there need to be a registered or whatever property manager for type 3? Since even though it's limited,
Well, they must have a
the owners
designated
are going,
SCR host that is available to
okay,
promptly deal with emergencies and other SCR
okay,
regulations.
okay,
So
very good. I wasn't.
I'm wondering if we should just say 30 days and then, I guess no more than 10 weekends is all. That's
Okay.
too- I don't know. I'm maybe
What
I would even lower that.
what was that, Jude?
I would probably lower that to 2 months worth, so 8 weekends.
So well,
Well, what are we,
we're getting,
okay, so wait, we were talking about that. That's what you were saying before. So like, what are we counting as a weekend? Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
yeah, the way the current law says, it says weekends are anytime between Friday evening and Monday morning,
Okay.
which I can add in here.
We probably should put that in there just so that somebody doesn't
Yeah.
have to seek it out.
Where weekends, yeah, let's say 10 weekends or parts of weekends.
Friday evening to Monday morning. I mean,
Yeah,
I feel like I'm okay with that, because again, this, depending on, the makeup of how this ends up going with I guess the target audience being snowbirds, this makes it so, there can be activity during a month or two absence. But, if that person wanted to long-term rent it, they completely could. This just gives them the opportunity to short-term it on the weekends for some of those months. I don't know. What were you thinking though, Jude? 8 weeks? So would it be, or 8 weekends? So it would be,
well, and I'm not, I don't really want to go below 10. I mean, I wish we could go above 30 days, frankly, but I'm sensing that's not going to fly. But I think 10 weekends, because, if somebody may be going January, February, March, and you're not even letting them do a whole 12 weekends. So I think we're being very restrictive already. And this is going to be somebody who really lives there. And even the people who were on the call talking about it are saying, hey, we live here a lot of the time, but we want to rent it out when we're not here. We really live here. So this number of days is somebody that really lives here. This number of days, oh, we lost Connor again. This number of days is not somebody who is just renting it out and making a hotel. 30 days and 10 weekends is somebody who really is going to live there a lot of the year, but just when they're not there. So I think, I don't want to be punitive to people. And I feel like going lower than these numbers is going to be punitive to people. So, and I feel like by getting rid of the other one, I think that we've come a long way.
Yeah. Should we wait for Connor to come back?
Oh yeah, I guess we could.
We can't really do much without him. There's only the two of us.
Well, except for the fact that I don't know why it's such a big deal. I mean, if we get back to the type 1 and type 2 and clarifying the kitchen again, and the whole reason why, I mean, you all tell me what you want the division to be, but I just want to make sure the words are clear so that people know. Here's Connor coming back here. So that people know what we're talking about. And the issue that I had before was the definitions of type 1 and 2. When we started the meeting last time, the definitions left room for confusion about what if you're this and what if you're that. And I feel like we shored up the definitions to say, again, type 1 is it's really your house. You got a shared entrance, you got shared kitchen. The owner is on premises or locally available. And I added the words are locally available to work, so people don't have to worry about, hey, I went to the grocery store, right? Or locally available. That's how I solved that. No more than 2 guests per bedroom and 4 guests total. So that was the type 1, which we might not want to restrict at all. And then type 2 was saying, hey, you really have a dwelling unit, or you've got 1 to 3 bedrooms, because this is just 1 or 2 bedrooms. this type 2 says you got more bedrooms, or you have a separate entrance, or you've got a kitchen. So I feel like we made type 1 really restrictive, restrictive in terms of you really are there and somebody's right in your house, like your cousin came to visit. And type 2 is they're really kind of more on their own. And so in any event, I didn't have a problem with it. It sounds like you all want to put the definition, you want to call it an ADU, but in any event, but the way we had it, I thought it was clear what the different things were. I thought these definitions were clear.
Okay.
And they do, and there was confusion with the definitions that were brought forth, which is why.
I definitely don't think there's any harm in giving the examples of attached, detached, ADU, sort of thing.
Three apartment.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess, or a guest cottage, because the definition for a guest cottage, if you look it up, I think it just doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, down at the bottom of that too, just to put IE, ADU, guest cottage, accessory apartment,
It's looking to see.
etc.
Here's guest
Well,
cottage.
Although it does actually say ADU already. It doesn't say ADU, it says accessory dwelling unit, but I can say ADU.
Here's a definition for a guest cottage in our current law. An accessory building on the same lot is a principal residential dwelling unit used for occupancy by either short-term guests or short-term guests of the owners or tenants of the principal dwelling. Wow. Or for occupancy by their domestic employees. Wow. Provided that such building shall contain no kitchen facilities and shall meet all applicable setback and lot coverage requirements, suitable water and sewage disposal.
So I've got, I did, so guest cottages, as you said, let me just go click on this. Okay. As you say, I mean, we can add guest cottage in the definitions, and we can say it could be a guest cottage.
Right. Short-term guests. I mean, guests, you see, back when this was written, a guest was considered a visitor, not a renter. You know what I mean? Now they're considered, short-term rentals. That's what they call them, guests. But they're, you know what I mean? It was a different interpretation of the word guest back then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we may have to look at that too.
Well, for now, I'll just pop it in here. So let me just, and I'm gonna pop it in with what it says, but we can change it for sure.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just gonna put in, okay, guest cottage, and I'm gonna Cleveland body 12.
You're going to add that to our definitions?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay. We may want to look at that definition.
Well, we may, but anyway, so I just pulled it right out of our current law.
Okay.
Which is what you're reading. Accessory building the same lot as principal residential dwelling used for occupancy of either short-term guests of the owners or tenants of the principal dwelling, or for occupancy by their domestic employees, provided that such building shall contain no kitchen facilities, and shall meet all the applicable setback and lot coverage requirements, and those requirements related to provision of suitable water. So an accessory building, so this is like a whole separate building. It's an accessory building.
That's a guest cottage,
yeah.
So the thing is, the only thing that bothers me about that is that we're not allowing tenants to short-term rent.
Well, correct. I just put it in there because you were talking about it. We don't have to have it. Yeah, but
we have to look at it.
But we can, if we want to say, so what we're saying, type 1 is, again, somebody's opening their door and somebody's staying in the bedroom and sharing the kitchen and all that stuff. That's type 1. Type 2 is either it's up to 3 bedrooms, or you got a separate door, or you got a kitchen, and I can say, or it's a guest cottage. So, because you've already said you can have an accessory dwelling unit, attached or detached, and a guest cottage is kind of a separate unit, and or guest.
Well, that's clearly how they're being used. So we may as well.
And or in a private home with a separate entrance from the main entrance of the house, and or a separate kitchen. So we just said type 1 is everything's shared. Type 2 is the residence there, but it's anything else. So
You know,
that's kind of what you're saying.
this is something we might want to look at there with a full-time resident.
When you say a full,
Resident slash owner.
okay. So, well, so we said resident occupied. We didn't say owner occupied. So,
Yeah,
Well,
and that is a good qualification, because again, we're trying not, we don't want subletting, or we certainly don't want, but we don't want to seem like subletting is somehow okay. A
well,
rental with a short-term rental.
if we want to change the words resident occupied to owner occupied, if that's what you're saying, then we'll just change it.
right. Well, you know, I think there's that distinction, and this is something that's come up with the current law. You know, what does that mean, owner occupied? That's why we put on the premises. But now that I'm
Right.
seeing resident, it could be a renter, and that's not what we're looking for. Right?
Yeah.
Well, the difference is if they're the resident, they are there full time. So if somebody's a resident, they are there full time. And if you'd have to have more than one dwelling unit on the property to have that. If somebody's a resident, I think the idea though is if somebody's the resident, they're part of the community. The whole point is we want people to be part of the community. So if it is resident occupied, even if it's not the owner, then you've got somebody who's part of the community because they reside there.
Well, but wouldn't that leave, I don't know, that feels like they would leave some strange gulf of like who's responsible if, say, an owner decides to rent an accessory apartment or a guest cottage while also long-term renting a main house.
You know,
And just because there's
I'm not sure that's allowed now, but I'm
it's
not
not.
sure. I think you can either
You
do
can't.
long-term rent or you can short-term rent. I don't think you can do both on the same property.
Well, you can't have more than one STR on the same property because that's
No, I'm
the
just
law.
saying, but I don't think you can also have a long-term and a short-term on the same property. I believe that's something we would have to look into. No, I think it has to be the owner. If we're gonna, I mean, listen, if you want to long-term rent your property, be my guest, but you don't get to have a short-term rental too.
So,
I
okay.
think it has to be resident owner occupied. I don't know. It's getting very complicated, but that's important, I think.
Okay. Well, so the first thing I'm going to do is we resolve this because we got rid of the one that was not incidental or secondary. So first of all, I'm going to say that's resolved.
You taking that out?
Well, I'm taking my comment out.
Okay.
My comment was, what does this mean, incidental and secondary? And we removed type 4, so all the other types fit in this statement. I was concerned because we had a type that didn't fit in the statement, but now all the types fit. So I had a question: to legally operate a short-term rental, all hosts must pay. Should we be saying the owner? So I asked whether it was owner, and with proof of payment, the building department and a host may receive one of 4 types of short-term rental permits.
Right.
Although now we're down to 3. So let me just.
I think you're right, owner.
Yeah.
So we would like to say owner in each case. Okay, so we're going to owner.
You're right.
Okay. And okay. There we go. All righty. So we've resolved that. And I'm going to go ahead and oh, you know what I didn't do? Oh, I did do it already. I did change the definition. Yeah, I changed. Okay. So I'm going to go and accept these. Do we need to keep these as?
No.
I'm going to accept the insertion, accept the deletion, accept insertion, accept deletion, and I'm going to delete my comment because we've resolved it. Okay. So I guess we maybe added this together and hold a valid permit for the current year. To legally operate a short-term rental, the owner must pay and all applicable fields established for the and hold a valid permit for the current year. So I can accept that. I mean,
Yeah.
People will agree to that, correct? Okay. So I'm going to accept the insertion. Okay. So moving right along, and we just made 3 types. I'll leave that out there. So of the categories, do we want to say owner occupied is resident? Because if it's a resident, then again, we know somebody's part of the community because they live there.
I think going with owner just makes a lot more sense. I mean, it's much
Okay.
clearer. It sets a good tone. And to be honest, there's already a vernacular, a familiar vernacular about it.
Mhm.
So, we're just
Okay.
making building on that.
Okay. So I'm going to change the
Oh,
yeah. And I need to do it down below because we have the definition down below. So
where was, okay, I guess it's hard. I'm on a laptop, so boy, sometimes it's hard for me to read these. Yeah,
Same.
your
iPad mini.
okay. All right. So we've changed from resident to owner occupied. And I just want to see whether to talk about the owner. Okay. So we're doing better there. And we did add or guest cottage. I'm looking to see whether we talk. So we didn't actually talk about in the definition as ADU, but we did talk about it up above. Oh, maybe we should have talked about it here. Oh, or inhabitable dwelling unit. Okay. Or guest cottage. I'm just trying to make this consistent with what we did. Okay. Okay. So we are making some progress. All right. I know we're still whatever about that. I mean, I think this makes sense the way we have it. And I'm not happy about changing the definition of ADU to take out the kitchen unless I do some research and really I'm comfortable with it, but I'm not comfortable with taking out kitchen from the definition of ADU.
Do we need
Anyway,
to change that number 2 to owner as well?
oh, I thought we had, but we didn't, did we? We do need to, yes.
There used to be a hotkey. I don't remember what it is anymore, but you can type in instance like
right.
S, R, what was it? RO dash, and then replace all of them at the same time. I
Yeah.
can't remember how you do that though.
But well, the thing I worry about with that is I've done a lot of documentation, and sometimes you change things you didn't mean to. So let me just go back to down below and get it changed down here as well. There we go. So you changed it both places. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're okay. So we're still thinking about types 1 and 2. Type 3, I think we're kind of
We were ahead of the curve on that owner part for this one.
oh, yay. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Drew, did you want to revisit again the day cap? Did you have an idea of what that could look like?
Maybe we should just look at some other towns.
Well, so we said right now we say 30 days per year and no more than 10 weekends. And I think that kind of you had dropped off when I was kind of making some statements. But the point here is if we want community, not commodity, if we're limiting to 30 days per year and no more than 10 weekends, clearly somebody's going to be living here the rest of the year. So if somebody's only allowed to rent out that number of days, very likely they are going to be in the house the rest of the year. So I don't want to be so restrictive. I feel like we would be punitive if we squoze it down more. Getting rid of the greater than 30 days, I'm okay with that. As Jude says, we're going to get pushback, but here we're allowing somebody to be gone for January, February, and even March, and they can still come back and live here the rest of the year. Or like people who've been on the call before have said, hey, they got kids, they got the kids going to school down in the city, but then they come up here on the weekends and whatever, and they're able to, so I think that this is by definition going to make somebody be community, not commodity, because we're not letting them rent enough that, that it's going to be a hotel, really. So I'm not really happy going lower than that. I'd rather say,
That could be a whole summer. Every weekend, a whole summer. Just thinking about somebody living next door to that, that's all.
right. And kind of, you were going to say something.
Well, no, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, again, it's kind of, especially, this is, I think another aspect of this is how will it be permitted? The first one, I think we all agree, is probably the least restrictive.
Right.
Um, only if the most social people could maintain that. But this third one, yeah, I gotta say, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to look into that myself a little more, because that's a tough one. I'm imagining, well, here's the other thing. Again, I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall here. But if they had sort of seasonal permits for type 3, so that we could favor more off season, there are more of those available than, say, summer permits, because if that is, I imagine, going to be the most congested time if everyone tries to just use that permit, during the busiest season just to do it. But if we say this, yeah,
I guess my thought is 10 weekends doesn't even let them do June, July, and August, because there's like 13 weekends, June, July, and August, right? So by definition, they're not going to be, I get it. They're probably going to be, I mean, this is really meant for somebody who's going away in January and February, but you're right. If we have this number of days, maybe they're going June, July, August, but I do want to avoid being punitive. And we do want to have it such that the person who is going away in January and February, because they're going to Florida and that's where they are, we do want to help them out. I thought we wanted to help them out. So that's really what it says. And I hear you, but the thing is, if people are doing noise, if it's a problem, I mean, the other thing that we say too is we try it out. The reason why we needed the STR law to begin with was because in the town board, we were hearing stuff, so many meetings where people would be saying, hey, you got to do something about this. We have a real disaster going on in town. And I have not been hearing that as much lately. So we put the law in place to fix a problem. And I would rather take a step that ratchets it back a bit, which is what we're doing by getting rid of type 4, and then see, do we still have a problem? So I feel like by taking type 3 and bringing the numbers down, I mean, I'd rather see them be more like 40 days a year and maybe 12 weekends. But in any event, I know you all don't want to go up, but I am not happy about going down, because we've got, this isn't giving people a lot of stuff they can do anyway. I mean, 30 days per year is not a lot of days.
I guess what I'm just concerned about is, again, like, if we don't structure this particular type, it does seem like there's a little bit of ambiguity enough to take advantage of it and just get to throw your lot in as an STR during the busiest seasons of the year, rather than for the way it was intended to be used. So I'm saying, if it's intended to be targeted to the months of January through March, then maybe there's a way we can just target it to those months and say that this is for off-season rental when people are snowbirding. And even if we don't want to restrict it to just those months, say, there are X number of permits to do this sort of thing, and most of them are available during these months. We have fewer that can be cycled during other, we'll call them peak seasonal times of the year: fall, summer, spring.
Okay. Well, why don't we, I mean, that's a good, that's a valid thought. So, I mean, that is a valid thought. So I would rather keep it the way it is, but I know that you both are concerned about that. So, well, let's look and see what else we have here and see if, so other comments that I had are, determine what, if this is the best number. What do we have here? Oh, 3 bedrooms. Yeah. So this, we said 1 to 3 bedrooms. Is this the best number, which that's currently allows for STR establishment, requires the owner to live on the property, allows up to 5 bedrooms with 2 people per bedroom, and allowed up to 10 total guests allowed. So the current law allows more than that. So we're being more restrictive than the current law by saying type 2 is 1 to 3 bedrooms.
We're talking about, we're
What
not
was
talking about a whole house.
what
You
was
see,
that?
there was some confusion with what owner occupied meant, and I feel like there was I don't know what the word I want to use is, but people who were renting their whole house were being
Mhm.
called owner occupied because they said they were here more than half the year, or they weren't, but that's what they
Right.
said. And then that became an owner occupied. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody lives in the house and they have some other way of renting, either an accessory apartment, a guest cottage, or they have a little
Mhm.
extra entrance somewhere. Those aren't going to be another house. Those are going to be a small unit. So I think 1 to 3 is okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're good. Okay. So we're going with 1 to 3. So I'll take out my, I just wanted us to think about it, and we're good. So, oh, there we go. So I'll delete the comment. So the comments gone. Okay, cool. So other comments. Oh, and here's where we said, so short-term rental type 2, limited max. So we hadn't, so we didn't have any limits. We didn't talk about whether we should have a limit. And what's the best? So for type 2, we said 4 guests total, 2 guests per bedroom, 4 guests. But if we have 3 bedrooms, I would kind of think that 6 guests total would be okay if we have up to 1 to 3 bedrooms. So I would think 6 would be okay, because again, we got the owner there.
Again, this was something I took from a couple other laws where they said 4. That's why I put that in there, was I'd seen it. I think Hurley might have had it, and Rhinebeck
Right.
had it, and
Mhm.
Aldi. That's why it ended up in there.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm definitely more of the mind that if we're doing up to 3 bedrooms, to guess that's, math says 6, right? So that
Okay.
doesn't seem like a giant number to me. I mean, again, I was a little more permissible on this end, but I also don't, at some point, if you're just going to buy a mansion to turn it into an STR, I mean, why not go buy a hotel?
Yeah. There you go. So, okay. So I'll delete the comment. So we're good. So limits. So for type 2, which is still the owner is occupied. So for type 2, are we limiting how many calendar days type 2 can be done? And for that matter, are we limiting, we didn't talk about whether we limit type 1 or not.
Yeah, I do think all of these should be limited in.
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll wait. He'll come back.
Oh, wait a minute, you got.
What's happening? I wonder what's happening. His internet's
Well, he's up north of us.
right. So his internet must be cutting out.
He was in the eclipse 100% area.
Yeah.
So we were in the eclipse 90% area, and he was, yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, there you go. It's connecting to audio.
Okay, sorry about that. Connection's weird. I'm probably gonna have to go soon, but
Yeah.
that being said, yeah, we should. I mean, I think all of them should have some sort of calendar limitation. I
Mhm.
think, what's more up in the air, especially for type one and, well, I guess for all of them really is, how many permits we should issue for each. Um, but that being said, I feel like staying at or south of 120 calendar days feels a little more in the range that I'm wanting to go in. Again, I am I want to be open minded. I want to be sympathetic to, again, the drive of, why people would do this, and, make it so that people can make some money. But, it just, I don't know. I'm hoping that, the other aspects of this law will help to keep down the,
Okay. So you're throwing out 120 days. Again, and so the old law had half of a year, 180 days, and half of a year, 26 weekends. So as you say, 120 days is like more like a third of the year. So,
well, and my, yeah, exactly. And the thing there too is how are we thinking of that? I'm thinking of it more as active dates, like no, I'm sorry, not as active dates, but as like an active time frame. So like you can you can rent your house for a period of 120 days,
mhm.
and you sign up to rent during those 120 days. How much you know,
Oh, so
maybe.
you're saying they can't rent 365 days a year, just make sure it's only 120 out of the 365. You're saying you're going to pick your months and you can't do other months. That you can't just, you're putting restrictions on.
I just wonder if that helps to make things more predictable. I'm positing, like, is that a way to consider doing this? Because,
Well,
120 days sort of arbitrarily scattered across the year. I don't know if that, I don't, I'm confident, I guess, that Granicus could, police that and all of that. But at the same time, for the sake of neighbors and keeping things predictable. I don't know, Jude, what do you think?
think it would be interesting to find out how people are doing this, what they're finding. I mean, we had people come and say they had no rentals January, February, March. That's how things are changing. Last couple of years ago, everybody was booked solid the whole year, and people were saying they had zero rentals January, February, March. I think this is something we have to investigate a little bit.
yeah. So,
Uh,
for, so for now, I put down there maximum 120 days per calendar year with no more than 18 weekends. So that's more like a third and a third. And I think it'd be very, again, I don't want to be punitive to people. I think it'd be very punitive to say, oh, and you got to pick your months and you can't go beyond those months because the owner's occupied. They got this dwelling unit and, so in
Yeah,
any,
but at the same time, in terms of being sensitive to the available housing, and just to be clear, if we're taking this definition of ADU as being something that contains a kitchen, then it's something that could be truly inhabited. And so to restrict it to a time frame opens it up to the possibility of more long-term rental, if not, partial.
well, right, right. Yeah. So,
You know, what I was going to say, one of the ways, and I think in the email I said this, you have ways of restricting these, and let's call it discouraging them, right?
yeah.
And encouraging a different kind of use for these properties. And I think one of the ways you do it is by limiting the number of days that they can rent it. And then maybe somebody will consider another option for renting.
Yep.
It's just another tool to try to, sway people to go in a different direction with their buildings.
Yep.
It's just a thought. It's just a thought.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, the 120 days per calendar year, no more than 18 weekends or parts of weekends. So,
Maybe, maybe
it,
just to keep this an open discussion, can we put next to 120 days per calendar year, like in parentheses, consecutive question mark or disparate.
I just think that's, you're just killing people. I think you're killing people
I
by
mean,
doing that.
I mean, I don't see how. I mean, if you have, we have multiple active seasons over here. A lot of them are, you know, fairly predictable. If you want to operate during those times, you could easily book, you know, you could make a lot of money within those 120 days. And my only question is whether it's 120 days scattered out around there or saying like you're going to be active during these months, you still get to make money. And if you clump them together, then at least the ADU becomes available to rent again for a dependable amount of time.
I can, you know, people that I've talked with, anyway, I just think that's punitive. I don't want to be punitive, and I feel like we've gone into punitive by saying, not only are we saying you used to be able to rent out 180 calendar days per year, and you used to be able to do 26 weekends. Not only are we taking a third off of that, but we're also saying we're like tying people up. It's like, you got to say you're only going to be renting over these months, and we're not going to let you rent beyond that.
Well,
so if you're a summer rental,
well, I,
the winter, and if you,
I don't. Well, maybe then I don't understand the impunitive, the punitive part of it, because when, again, when just to ground this conversation in these anecdotal but still, you know, pretty universally shared perspectives, you know, that building across the street from Yum Yum and the music shop, like above from the little clothing shops there, that used to be all long-term rental.
mhm.
None of it is anymore. It's just a big, disparate bunch of run rooms under one umbrella. So, you know, I mean, punitive to who? Punitive at what, you know, against what context? And again, you know, our goal here is not just to create and manage opportunity, but to manage fallout and to consider, you know, the long-term health of the area. So again, treating all of these things, and maybe again, when we look at them as buildings too, looking at spaces like that and saying like, yeah, what if there were, and hey, maybe if we went, the 120 is a bit of a spaghetti number too. We could go back. Maybe I could go back to 180 if that were the open times. If it were saying that like you have this half of the year to operate, and the other half of the year you can rent long term.
Or
I think
30 or a 30-day rental. You know, I think one of the things I put in here is that you can't have a short-term rental in a mixed-use building, because I was sensitive to the fact that all of those apartments used to be long-term. And that's why I put it in there. It's further down, but I'm like, no mixed-use
Yeah.
building. Because
Yeah.
those are the ones that are right in town for people who maybe don't have transportation or.
yeah, public transportation.
Right. So I did put that in there, and I saw that somebody already objected to it, but I do think it makes sense. It's a commercial building. You know, it's not a residential building, and they're short-term renting them. And I think all of those apartments above, and some of them still are long-term rentals, but there seems to be a trend to short-term rent them.
Yeah. So do we, it sounds like we want to think about a number of things. So
I just want to make a note memorializing that thought, because I do think there's something, you know, it's not our only prerogative. It's not our main prerogative to create affordable housing, but it is part of the landscape. It is part of
Mhm.
the health and of the community we're trying to create. And if there are ways to sort of regulate, okay, last thing then, if this is a way for us to think about that vacancy rate. Remember that vacancy rate that kept coming up? And it's kind of like, you get it, you understand why a 5% vacancy rate is a healthy number, but how do you approach it? How do you think about it? This is just one way maybe we can start thinking about
And Laura, I do understand. I know this has been an ongoing conversation about whether or not people want to long-term rent their accessory buildings. I'm aware that you have opinions about that.
I've lived it. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I've lived it. And there are people that say, if I can't STR it, I'm not going to long-term rent it either, because been there, done that, never doing it again. So,
But they can do a 30-day rental. They still have that option.
yeah, they still have that option. So, anyway, I, I mean, my preference is to do things in a way that's taken it by steps. So
Mhm.
I'm okay with the step that says, hey, we've taken a step by saying you can't be running more than 30 days if you're not going to be there. We've already taken that step because we took out type 4. We've taken a step here by saying you used to have a maximum of 180 days. Now we've said 120. You used to have a maximum of 26 weekends. Now we're saying only 18. And that's even if you're going to be owner occupied. You still have a limit to how much you can do it. I just can't deal with saying, and then you got to pick your months that you're talking about for 120. I just, sorry, I can't deal with that. But in it, maybe I'll be able to deal with it next time we talk, but I can't deal with it now. But I can deal with taking things and taking a step. So I can deal with 120 and the 18 weekends because we're taking a step.
Yeah, but that's, I'm sorry, Laura, but I don't really accept that. We're a board. You don't. I mean, are you exercising some power to veto our suggestions? I mean, this is a
Well,
group effort, and I'm not asking us to say like let's all agree to this now. I'm saying let's put it. You have comments on there. If you want to add a different bubble in your margin that says has my initials on it, I
sure,
would like this memorialized for us to return to.
sure. But the other thing too, though, is since I am on the town board, it's kind of seems nuts to me to put something in here that I know I would fight and I would work on getting a quorum of the town board to overturn it. I'm just saying. So there are
Well,
some
I
things
mean,
I feel like I've been a
uh,
pretty good sport because I went along with getting rid of type 4. I feel like I've been a pretty good sport because I wish we could have raised the 30 days per year and 10 weekends. I wish we could have raised that number. I've been compromising. I've been a pretty good sport. I've been going with the flow here, but there's some points at which it's beyond what I can deal with. Just saying.
well, and here's the thing, I mean, this I appreciate that, but I like you said in this place before, where this is part of the democratic process, and if you feel the need to lobby against it, and we have to lobby for it, then that's our individual prerogative. But as long as we all respect the process and the time we're
Sure,
putting into this, because
sure.
there's a lot to consider, against all the presentations we've had. And I definitely think that having some sort of quarterly or some sort of third of the month, whatever we come up with process, where maybe it is, yeah, where it is quarterly or something like that, could again open more opportunity in some of the other realms that we are looking to create opportunity.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're all thinking about it, but I think that we've really constricted with the changes we've already made. I think we've really constricted a lot of people already. So, draconian is the word that comes to mind. We're, I mean, there's a point at which you get a little draconian. So, in any event, but we'll see. Well, I'll think about it. Let's put it that way. I'll think about it. I've written in here, as you say, that you request that we consider,
Yeah.
and and it sounds like you're thinking we should have and again, this is the owner occupied. It's just that they may have an ADU, they may have 3 bedrooms inside their house, they may not even have a kitchen for people. See, that's kind of the thing too, is we've said type 2 includes if they don't have a kitchen. Type 2 includes, it's a guest cottage with no kitchen. Nobody's going to live there full time. Type 2 includes, you know, they have an entrance separate, but doesn't mean that they can cook. So we've
But
said in
again,
type 2.
and again, our prerogative, if we're going to treat and this is not our fault that, you know, the definitions for guest cottage and ADU are the way they are, but I don't want to write this law in a way that encourages people to not build ADUs that can be long-term rented, because we might favor them more if they were building guest cottages that could only be STR. You know, I mean, I'd rather encourage them to do a little more work on their guest cottage, turn it into an ADU so that they can maximize their property's value and not depend on the government to maximize it for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
You know, when we go further down, I think I said something about ADUs, that would apply only to existing buildings. Not,
So
not future, not future. Not future built, not future ones, not ones that haven't yet been built, but ones that exist as of the date of the when the law is adopted. Which is
so you're saying what you're saying it
what they did. This is what they did with the accessory apartments too. They allowed them for people who already had for the detached ones. They allowed them if you already had one. If you had a garage, you could convert it. But if you're putting up an accessory apartment after the date of the enactment of the law, it can't be a short-term rental.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Well, just because that's what they did with the accessory apartments. It was to discourage, you know,
yes.
that you know, more
Prospecting, you know, sort of like a building rush to, you know, buy properties and build a bunch of ADUs on.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and I can get there too. I mean, just in any event, I mean, I know it's maybe been a little painful, but I am happy with the direction this is moving in, at least in terms of discussion.
yeah. Okay. All right. So I don't know whether we want to keep going. I know we all said we were going to end by 8, and kind of you've been beyond 7:30, and
yeah,
anyway.
I think I better get going, and you know, who knows, I might lose you guys again anyway. But
Yeah, it's happened all these times, and I appreciate, and I guess we have to figure out. But again, I know I'm sensing that you think I'm being, you know, digging my heels in. You don't appreciate it, but I compromised on, because I would have changed a bunch of stuff, and I agreed to take it out because 2 of you felt strongly, and I could live with it. So I am compromising, just very clearly. I just want to make it clear, I am compromising because I'll go a certain degree in a certain direction, but there's a point at which I just think it's wrong, and I'm going to be true to myself. So things that I think the town can and should live with, I'm okay with. But if there's something that I just know I just can't deal with it. But again, I've already gone with the flow here on a number of things that have gotten a lot more restrictive, but there's a limit.
Well, I mean, the other thing, which we probably don't have time to discuss, is, you know, I mean, there's a shrinking boat, you know, and, you know, maybe I want to keep things moving, and I think we have the potential to keep things moving. But, you know, if we should, if not for the sake of having not just 2-1 or unanimous or whatever it is votes, you know, I can't remember, you know, but I know some names were floating around. But, you know, are we looking for new membership? I know there was probably an ad out already before.
I think we should be. I'm looking to avoid people that have their own agenda. I would like to have somebody that has either ZBA experience or planning board experience. I think that would be perfect. So I don't know whether, Jude, you're on the ZBA. I don't know if there's anybody else on the ZBA that might be a good candidate. I don't know whether anybody on the planning board, but if there's somebody that doesn't have any experience writing laws or any experience using Woodstock's laws, I'm a little hesitant to add. I'm not looking to throw a warm body into us, because
of course,
I think tremendously highly of both of you. So I think very, very highly of both of you. And we may disagree, which we are kind of here right now, but that doesn't change the fact that I think very highly of both of you. And I think we could get a lot done. It's just at what point, what do we do when we have a big disagreement? I guess we have to figure out, do we just say majority rules? I mean, again, there's certain stuff that I don't know whether it's going to be, but anyway, we'll have to, but I think
So-
as it is just the three of us, I think there's a lot we
So-
can.
So this is what I think about this, is I think that, Laura, perhaps, the reality is if you're going to take something to the town board, you probably have to be behind it on some level. Right?
Just
So-
some level.
So then the question becomes, do we have the opportunity to try to persuade you about certain things? That's all.
But you have already. You persuaded me
yes,
about
yes,
everything except for this one thing. You persuaded
Yeah.
me on everything except for this one thing.
Okay.
So you've
Got
been successful everywhere else.
Okay.
So here, and I don't, were you going to recommend someone, Jude? Because, we had, I know Stu came up at
Yeah.
one point, and he, I think, is a very, he's definitely worthy of consideration. Stuart Lipkin, he's no longer on the planning board. He left a little bit. God, was it before or after me? Maybe it was a little bit before. But he's a lawyer. He brought a lot to the planning board while I was on there. And if he were interested, I think he would be a good set of eyes and ears.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, cool. That's it. That would be a good person to reach out to. So, alrighty. So, okay. So I think we're good. We're good for today. I'll send this to everybody. We can incubate it all. And, but anyway, and we'll just see where we go. So,
Great. Thank you.
All right.
and so we're meeting next in 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thanks everybody. We'll talk in 2 weeks.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye,
Good
guys.
night.